Hello everybody and welcome back to OMSI 2 on the And More Bus Videos YouTube channel. I'm also known as And More Central depending on what day of the week and what video you're watching. And welcome back to Bowdenham version 5 and welcome back to the brand new Blueprint Productions B7TL and B9TL Gemini pack. This has recently been released, you may or may not be able to tell. We, in the previous video, drove the B9TL Gemini in the First Bus corporate video. If you haven't already, do go and check that video out. We had a lovely run on the 408 from Apsley Station up to Hereford Station. Lovely run, the old 375. The bus coped beautifully. It was a really nice run. A few minor bits and bobs that we did find. A few bits, as I say, a few minor niggles here and there. We found along the route, we found on the bus. A lovely video to watch though, so please do go and check that one out. And now, today's video, we are taking a look at the B7TL Gemini, the older vehicle, the predecessor to the B9TL, if I can speak. So these were produced with Gemini bodies from around 2000 to 2006, or 2007. 2007 was when the crossover occurred, when B7TLs were discontinued in favour of the brand new beefier B9 9-cylinder engine, which was proving much more popular. It was more practical on hills, easy to maintain, a little bit more guzzly on the fuel, but overall preferred by operators. So about 2007 time was when the B7 fizzled out. The vehicle that we're driving in this video is UUI 2905, that, as the branding states on the side, is one of the old Leicester vehicles. I believe this livery is supposedly reflecting what the DAFs had. I don't know if the B7TLs had this branding on. I know the recently departed VDL DB250 did. However, I do know that this vehicle wasn't Leicester. It may or may not have carried that, and it will have had a very similar livery to this. And just like this B7 is a Hoover. So there are 35 different variations of the B7TL and B9TL in total. The B7TL variation do include a variation of the sounds that do showcase a Hoover. Now, I have been pre-warned that the B7TL sounds are heavily contested. Some people don't mind them, some people have listened to them and gone, oh my gosh. So I am going into this video with an open mind, as I hope you all will be as well. I believe this is the Hoover variation, having moved it from where it plunked itself to a more appropriate starting point. It does sound like a rough B7 as well, that's probably reflective of this particular vehicle. And in this video we are going to be covering the 437 service. So I will move it now onto, oh, I've missed it, I've done the cardinal sin, although to be fair, I've noticed that there's a down arrow here, and on most of the vehicles I do that on, there isn't one, so you have to re-go through the whole thing. So we're not doing Gastamana, we're not going to Bottom Road, we are in fact going to Fodham Green. So we'll give that a second to load up. I have changed the lights, quite interesting on this vehicle compared to the B9. All my lights have to be done manually, so I have to do the manual light switching. You can come over to here as much as you want. However, it unfortunately does not mean that I am going to be letting you on here. So 5, although to be fair, I am late. So again, well, I'm supposed to be leaving now. So I'm not doing as late. And then we'll leave that on. I mean, there is an ID card you can also plonk on, but I am one a stickler for putting the numbers in, because that's what I tend to do in real life as well. So we'll get that all sorted. We'll let them on here. As I say, our lights are on, our destination's on. It does feel like I'm driving an Arriva in the Shires or a Arriva in Kent bus. It does feel like the part. I believe this particular example is now somewhere around that area, thus why I chose it, and because when I looked through the photos it looked like it's got the most similar-ish interior to this one, thus why I thought it's probably going to be the most realistic. As I say, I do think this is more reflecting the DAF DB250s, the VDL DB250s, whatever you call them, interior. However, I do think that some of the B7s have this. I know one of the B7 ALX 400s I've been on with Arriva does have this style of interior. So anyway, with all that said and done, we'll click the right button to shut the door and we'll make a move. To note as well, it does have an old B7 interior. There are two different interiors that you can have as part of the different variations. This one has the older style that is appropriate with this particular vehicle that we are driving. Presumably why it sounds like an older B7 with an older dashboard. However, there are also some B7s as you go sort of 05, 06 or 7 plates that do have the newer uplifted dashboard. So we will be driving one with the new uplifted dashboard very soon. For now, we're driving this one. All the B7TL double deckers I have driven. I've driven a B7R release single with the newer one. All the doubles I've driven have had this dashboard. Interesting. 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 I initially thought we were going to have a bit of a hoover when it moved. I mean, outside. Outside that sounds out bad. However, that is just a B10 ZF. And the problem is between a B7 and a B10, you don't have to be an expert to be able to tell the difference. When you floor it, you get B7. When you floor it, you get B7. So when you floor it, it wouldn't necessarily arguably be one of the older variations, as some of the older B7s sound very different to the newer ones with the axles. Because I used to absolutely adore the sort of YJ or 06s that First Bus in Halifax used to have, just purely because of how good the axles sounded going down hills. And you can sort of get that with this now. This is a slightly older one and you wouldn't really get that as loud. You'd get more rough engine sounds. That is a shame. You do get, as I say, it is a lot of... You do hear B10. No matter how much you do not want to hear B10, you hear B10. That is a shame. That is a big shame. I'm afraid that really is. I knew that it was something I was anticipating. I would be lying if I said it wasn't something I wasn't already made aware of. I have, again, as I did say in the previous video, I have already watched videos. I have already seen people's opinions, and I like to do that before I do the videos myself because I feel it makes what I say to you all a little bit richer. It makes it a little bit more researched, understood. I'm not just repeating what everybody else says. When you absolutely floor it, you hear it, but then again as well, the revs, it's not... The revs aren't right. They've changed, like, if you heard it then, I'll try and get it to do it again. If you hear it, it's sort of, the gear's too long. The gear's too long. The gear's way too long. It doesn't change at the right time. And then when you set off, it just sounds like a B10. And it literally it has the the B10ZF kickoff is what it has, followed by a bit of disjointed B7, then with a traditional chirp that you get with this older dashboard that I do like. Don't get me wrong, the model itself, absolutely, I mean, apart from the fact that I've done that on a bit of raised road marking that shouldn't be as raised as it is, because that marking's floating. It is getting better as it warms up, but you still, the gearbox isn't matching what the B7s I've driven matches, and I have driven my fair share of pretty tired B7s at this point. I've driven all sorts of B7s, some with Gemini bodywork, some with not, with President bodywork, and I think I've driven one with ALX bodywork now as well. I might have done, possibly. I'll have to check my list. I do keep a list of all the buses I drive. You ask anyone who is an enthusiast, and they will have a list of every single bus that they've driven. It's just a thing. You've got to keep a log of something. Some people keep a log of all the routes that they drive, or all the shifts that they do. Some people keep a list of how many passengers they carry. I personally keep a list. Oh, why has the steering decided we're going this way? That was weird. At least you get to see the bus reversing blind. I don't know why. I don't know if you noticed there. You could see the steering blotching. Don't know what that was, but again, as you see, we have a lovely reversing blind. Apologies about that, folks. That's such a shame, because you can hear that that is clearly B10. Don't get me wrong, you change that sound, you adapt it, you go into something like GarageBand or one of the fancy larder Darwins, and you mess with that about, you could make that into B7. But as it currently stands, that's B10. Is that getting it to pop over that gate? Yes, I have driven an ALX 400 B7. It's coming out in Series 2 of Day in the Life of Bus Driver. Oh no, have I said too much? It's coming out in Series 2 of A Day in the Life of Bus Driver. Me driving a B7TL on road replacement. Absolutely no spoilers at all if you watch this series. Absolutely no spoilers at all. Tradition, yes, it has been rebranded and revamped, but tradition remains. There is still spoilers for the Ammo Central channel. That is still the extra little ploy of this series, is you do get the spoilers. You get the spoilers. I will not tell all the Ammo Central people, because this is the chilled out Ammo Central filming on an evening, as Ammo Bus videos, sort of masquerading as a different channel, even though I am the same person and I run both channels. But hey ho. It is a shame. It's got that gap. There's gap between sounds, so it sort of jumps and it misses that middle build-up. The build-up to when it sounds like it's coasting at high speed. You sort of go from a little bit of renown, a little bit of... So it's sort of... a little bit of renown. Then a little bit of uncertainty, am I a B10, am I a B7? Okay, I'm a B7 and I'm coasting. And that's the issue. That transition. But if you're outside, you've got this ticking. You're inside, you don't hear any of the ticking. You'd hear a little bit of it. I mean, yes, it wouldn't be as audibly as loud, but you'd hear a little bit. It feels like two different vehicles when you're inside or outside. Two very, very different vehicles. Now, again, I understand that Blueprint Productions wanted the B7 and the B9 out at the same time. I fully understand that. I fully understand the idea of getting them both out at the same time. However, as said by my good friend Joe and said by other folk, would it have possibly been wise to release the B9 and then release this as an additional extra? So go to folks, yes, you're paying £16.99. However, you are paying £16.99, and very, very soon you're going to get an added free bonus of a brand new bus. And I think that buying into that would probably have been a little bit better. Yes, if everybody would have probably looked and gone, B9 for £16.99, that's probably steep. But on the hindsight, you look at how much we've paid for Studio Polygon products recently, and you look at it and you go, well, probably not that bad. We've got inflation going on currently, and people have to, like, people who make these still have to earn a living, and will either choose to, oh, she's wanting the boss, will either choose to sacrifice their time to make these and then hopefully make the cash off that, or we'll have to do this in between work. And as somebody who's currently doing this between work, I can tell you it's always an interesting balancing act. I know it's currently run by Stagecoaches, this route, but it will always be the 240 with a Reaver. But then again, I am one of these people that it takes a lot of effort to change all the routes around, and I'm still in that decision stage whether I want to download the pack that reintroduces all the original liveries and routes, or I want to keep it like this purely because the update pack that Reed sort of returns it doesn't get rid of the TFL stops and keeps all the original signage, and I think that would just annoy me more. So on that particular perspective, that is the reason why I have not changed anything and sort of just stayed put, because I think it would annoy me more if I started to change things. I do need to get some of the AI working. Problem is I've uninstalled a couple of buses. I'm sort of having a refresh of the vehicles that I own and run and all of that lot. And I've had a bit of a refresh, and I think I've sort of got rid of too many vehicles, as you do. So I need to change some AI lists, possibly change some AI lists with new vehicles and stuff like that. But we'll see what happens, see what happens, and see what makes sense. We'll get rid of the... I think it looks really good with sort of the fog behind it as well. I do really like it. So, on to the concept of someone that was back here in the OMSI world when the original B7 released. There are videos on the Ammo Central channel of me driving with a much squeakier voice than now. I mean, saying that particular sentence didn't give me much credibility, but a much squeakier voice than now. Driving the original MM2 converted B7 Gemini. And I know that there are still a few of you that have watched since day one and will be thinking the age-old question, Ammo Central, what's the difference? What is going on? Well, much updated bus. Bus is significantly better. You will all agree with me. And I'm hoping a few of you will comment and go, I remember your video back then. I remember watching that. We have come a long way. I am hoping for comments along the lines of that, because I'm like, yes, that is where we stand. We now have a properly working B7 Gemini. The way it sounds, I rarely it veins me to say this. It really, really does vein me to say this. And I'm going to try and get I want to try and get a screenshot where the vehicle isn't within trees. Isn't within trees, but has the trees surrounding. So basically, something like that. As you will all know on this channel, is incredibly rare for me to achieve. But something just perfect like that. That, I think, will do the job nicely. That was spot on. I think that'll be the thumbnail, a bit of rural Arriva action. But I really dread to say it. It doesn't bring me any comfort in saying it. However, the sounds that we're dealing with here, and those of you who watched the video back, the old B7 back, you'll be thinking the same. These sounds ain't blooming far off. What we had to deal with the original B7 MM2 convert. The sounds are blooming similar. They are a little botched together. Now again, I cannot emphasise this enough, and I know I'm going on about the sounds. But apart from the fact that it got stuck in gear, apart from that, that we will ignore, if we listen to this, sounds more like a B7 outside. The ticking masquerades over the B10. You can still hear the little B10 twang, but it does masquerade over it. However, the problem is because that even a little bit of ticking has not been brought inside, even a little bit to mask it over, that's what you can hear inside. I think that's the big issue. Don't get me wrong, it is something they are working on. They are actively working on to update it and sort it. It isn't something that is going to be stood in solidarity. They aren't going to say, this is now your bus forever. Ha ha ha, we've had all your money. No, Blueprint Productions are not like that. They are a new setup, as I say, team, I believe, an offshoot of some of the folk, I want to say, from a few of the other development companies. Who have sort of set up, so they have that experience behind them. It's just a new name and a new collaboration. So there is that, but they are actively working to update it. So it is something that will be fixed very soon. I mean, what we do have to remember is the B7TL ALX 400 released by V3D. The sounds on that B7 are phenomenal and could potentially be used in the older variations like this particular B7. And then what we do have to remember that I think quite a few people do forget is that V3D opened the data of the B7TL ALX. So what V3D did with that vehicle is basically said all the software used to create it is now open freeware. So there was no patent, no copyright, no limitation on use. So basically, although I would imagine somebody will mod it anyway, will mod the ALX B7 sounds onto this. I would imagine somebody is already working on that. I wouldn't be surprised by the time this video releases if somebody has already done it. Because you would, wouldn't you? Someone somewhere will be doing that. And it will be on Fella's Film. I would be very surprised if it isn't. What they could do with Blueprint is they could actually use the sounds from the B7 ALX 400 on this because the B7 because the B7 ALX 400 is now free open software, so they could in essence use the sounds. Then you could still charge the product. The product could still be the same. You could just copy and paste the sounds because the B7ALX was opened as open free software for all. So there is that potential, although I do imagine that somebody is just going to mod them on Fellas Foam anyway. Wouldn't surprise me by the time this video is released if somebody has already done that, in which case, for the next video, don't you worry, that those sounds will be featuring. But there is always the potential, and you never know. Never know. Although they could just come with their own sounds. I mean, the main thing for me is ensuring that the older B7s like this one, with the older dash, have the older B7 sounds that are marginally different to what you get on a newer B7. So you get that sort of axle sound at high speed when the vehicle's coasting happy. On an older B7 you don't tend to get that, you tend to get a bit more rumble. And they're your differences, and as a driver you also notice differences in how they drive, differences in their acceleration. Marginal bits, but bits if you are going to replicate a bus properly, like they have done with the B9, stuff that you have to take into consideration. Although again, arguably, the B9 is much easier to replicate because to especially older enthusiasts, people tend to see all the B9s as the same. They tend to be like, oh, well, they're all the same bus. There's not much difference in your B9s. You'll have your air leaks, you'll have some of them that higher rev, some of them that have more soundproofing than others, and then you'll have your faults, you'll have your fan on, stuff like that. But generally speaking, if you are replicating a standard healthy B9, your B9s throughout time are all the same. So they are easy to replicate. These trees are very low. We are losing windows right now with how low those trees are. So there is that relative nature of it. I will always remember, I think one of the, if not, it might be the only Gemini body B7 I've driven. I have driven B7TLs, I've just not driven a lot of Gemini ones. I believe I drove a 52 plate example, new to Arriva London, passed through a couple of operators, was on loan to a company I drive for. We had it on our service, the university shuttle, the 398. You'll have seen the video on the day in the life of bus driving. If you haven't already, do go and check out that series. The links are in the description, because I talk about my real life bus driving experiences. My real life bus driving series is in the description below for you to check out, so that you can obviously relay and relate too. One of the ones I drove long before I started filming was a 52 plate, and I will always remember it. It was a shorter B7. It was a dual door X London, so because it had the door in the middle and the extra weight with the glass, it was slightly shorter in length. So it wasn't one of these longer full length B7s, it was a slightly shorter length example, X London. The vehicle had this dashboard, and I will always remember it because it had a couple of faults. It went through a period where it wanted to believe it was on fire. That was fun. It then got fixed quite quickly, but it decided it wasn't on fire. It never had a fire, but it just decided it was on fire constantly. So that was sorted. But you could turn the steering wheel on that bus with your little finger. It was that light. The steering on that bus was as light as a feather. It was beautiful to drive. In comparison to the DB300 I then drove, that used to pull the muscles in your arms if you drove it a lot, with the steering being quite rigid. You'd then jump off that onto B7 and you'd launch yourself because the steering was that light. It was such a lovely motor. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting this steering to be really light as a feather, because probably wouldn't be realistic for most B7s. Most B7s probably aren't, and from the other ones I have driven, they have light steering, but they're not all as light as that. And again, this reflects that. So there is that reflection with it. There is this idea that it is still, doesn't feel as light as the B9. Doesn't feel as light as the B9, however, it is still relatively light. Oh, we're a couple of minutes late. Oh, but the next stop is there, though. I did forget how rurally it gets around here. But again, what we love about Bowdenham is just the sheer variety. You can drive a city service one day, and then the next one you do is like the 437 to Bowdenham Green. And it's a very, very contrasting map. We're going to move on to another map for the next video, though. I do want to use a different map for the next one. We're going to, so far, I believe I've just used the readily available liveries. So I've just used the liveries that come within the repaint pack. This is available off the Blueprint Productions website when you purchase the B9. So I have only done repaints from that so far. However, the next video is going to be including the first of a couple of repaints that have been made by third party that are available off the Fellas Foam forums site. So as the sun begins to set, we are now arriving at Bowdenham Green Terminus. Only a couple of minutes late, we've done okay. Say I left only a minute late, I've lost another minute compared to the 375, 408, whatever you want to call it, run. It's quite interesting, but hey ho, there we go. And as you switch the engine off, the lights go off, bits like that, just as you do, and then interesting because as you put your ignition on, you should be able to get the lights back on inside. Interesting. Wasn't quite expecting that. There we go. So that was the 437 from Garston Manor to Bowdenham Green, the old 240. However, the destination number and the livery of the bus sort of gave Kent vibes. Yeah, it seemed appropriate. I think if it had been 240, I just wouldn't have felt as comfortable. I think 437 with this type of vehicle, this sort of rural route, seemed quite appropriate for Cornwall. Not Cornwall, Kent. Cornwall's very different, but for Kent. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video. It is a shame with the B7 sounds at the moment. However, I do know that Blueprint Productions are working on them. So do not let these sounds put you off purchasing a lovely, lovely vehicle. The bodywork on the vehicle is amazing. The handling, the dashboard, the features on the vehicle are amazing. And as you saw in the previous video, you get an absolutely phenomenal B9 with absolutely phenomenal sounds with this B7. Soon to follow with sounds just as phenomenal. So I will be doing more videos on this. Our current theme on the channel is the B9s and the B7s. I've sort of split the OMSI 2 content up into series, as I mentioned in the previous video, if you did miss that. So they sort of will be chunked series now with the odd gap in between. That means a little bit more conformity for you lot, a little bit more standardisation, a little bit more care into the videos as well. And it also eases a little bit of pressure on me. With all that said and done though, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have done, do be sure to click that like button so that more people can find it and enjoy like you have. And if you haven't already, do be sure to subscribe to the And More Bus Videos YouTube channel for more content like this from OMSI 2, as well as the And More Central channel, my main YouTube channel, for content from the real life bus industry and my day in the life of bus driver series. Once again, I would like to thank you all for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. I do hope you go and check out my other content as well as the previous video with the lovely B9. But for now, thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video, mate. Bye for now. Bye.